Are you wondering if you should get the Whoop strap? Well, the Whoop strap is one of the best all-round health and fitness trackers out there, and I use it myself every day. But it's also not the absolute best device in any particular category, and I can actually back that statement up with data.
For instance, during most exercises like running, the heart rate tracking is quite accurate. It's amongst the top 70 to 80% of devices out there. Now, I also tested the correlations on a second person and got more or less the same results, so they seem to be mostly robust.
For sleep stage tracking, it's also pretty good, being amongst the second best devices, though again there are a few devices that are outperforming it. And for tracking and displaying your health data, it also has one of the best and most interpretable apps out there. The Whoop strap was even able to predict when I had COVID-19, but there are some caveats there that we need to discuss. However, the Whoop strap is not without its flaws. The data sharing of Whoop has always been pretty bad. It's your data, so you should have easy and complete access, and the Whoop has gotten better at this. It's not close to the level of detail that the competition provides. So whether or not you should get the Whoop strap really depends on what you want to do with it and how you intend to use it. So let's dive right into the testing data. Before doing that, I should mention I will add an affiliate link to Whoop below, which gives you a discount and earns me a commission and supports the channel. I only accepted this after extensively testing it and seeing that it did well, and the Whoop strap is now genuinely something I can recommend to friends and family. Also, Whoop doesn't even know I'm making this video. The data was not filtered and all my opinions are my own, but as promised, let's now take a look at the actual data. So let's start by looking at how the Whoop strap 4.0 did for running outside on me for a total of 22 runs.
As always, we'll compare the Whoop strap 4.0 against the Polar H10 ECG chest strap, which can generally record my heart rate very accurately, and I'm using a second reference device as a backup. Now, using it as a reference device means that we're assuming that the chest strap is accurate, and there's quite some evidence for it, which you can find in the description below.
Where each dot in this plot is a single matching heart rate measurement, with along the horizontal axis the value according to the reference device, and along the vertical axis the value according to the Whoop strap 4.0. And this blue line right here indicates perfect agreement between the Whoop strap and the reference device, so any dot along this line indicates that the Whoop strap 4.0 matches exactly with the reference device. And luckily we can see that most points are on or at least close to this blue line, so that's looking very good. There's a little bit of deviation right here, so the fact that there are a few dots above the blue line right here indicates that it sometimes detects a slightly too high heart rate, but overall almost all points are very close or on this blue line. The correlation is actually also quite good, which is this R value up here. The R value cannot be higher than 1, so a correlation of 0.94 is pretty good. But let's take a look at the individual runs to see if we can explain why sometimes there are some points above the blue line. So here we have one example of a recent run that I did with the Whoop strap in red and the reference device in blue-green. And as you can see, there's generally a very good agreement between the Whoop strap and the reference device. So we see the values over time right here, and only here in the beginning is there a bit of deviation, but overall the heart rate agreement is very good between the Whoop strap and the reference device. Now for this other run, it also generally looks quite good, but it struggled a little bit again here in the beginning. It could even be that my skin is still warming up here in the beginning, so it's harder to track my heart rate. Then as it gets warmer, it gets better. Now for this third example run, it was basically spot on. And then for this example here, it also did really well. So overall, I would say the runs look quite good with some minor deviations sometimes. And there might be a slight bias for more deviation in the beginning, but we need a lot more data on a lot more people to say with certainty. So for running outdoors, the performance of the Whoop strap 4.0 appears to be quite good. I'm happy enough with this performance. But let's next take a look at what should potentially even be an easier exercise for the Whoop strap to track indoor running. We'll get to all that testing soon, but first a small request. As you may know, I'm a full-time scientist running this channel in my spare time, spending most of my weekends and evenings on these videos. After years of doing all of this alone, I realized I need some help, so I'm actually talking to a potential editor. But this also means I have to increase the channel's revenue somehow. To do this, I've enabled YouTube membership, so if you'd like to support the channel and receive some perks like early access to initial testing, please join that community. If you're interested, please click the link below or up here. Now back to the heart rate testing. And indeed, here we have the results for running indoors, with again the reference along the horizontal line and the Whoop strap 4.0 along the vertical axis. And as you can see, there's an almost perfect agreement again, and the correlation is even better than before at 0.98. So for running indoors, the Whoop strap 4.0 seems to be performing very well. But again, let's take a look at one or two examples. And looking at an example for running indoors here, we can indeed see that the Whoop strap 4.0 did quite well, though again in the beginning is there a bit more deviation, so it struggled a bit right here. Also for this indoor run right here, we actually see quite a bit of deviation and only in the beginning. So maybe indeed it's warming up. It's quite a bit colder now and I often don't heat my apartment. Then again, for this indoor run, it was less of an issue. Though again, we see a bit of deviation in the higher heart rate range. Still, probably overall, this would be good enough for me. But how about you? Would this be good enough for you? Let us know in the comments below. But of course, there's a few more types of exercises we need to look at. So let's look at those. And here we have the results for cycling indoors, which should be a relatively easy exercise for a watch the track. And as you can see, the Whoop Strap 4.0 did very well. I had to make each individual dot quite transparent because there's so much data right here. And if there's a dark black color, that means that there's very many dots in that area. And as you can see, almost all points are on or close to the blue line. Every once in a while, it takes a bit too low of a heart rate, but the correlation is very good at 0.97. So overall, this looks very good. But let's take a look at a few examples to see how often it takes a too low heart rate. Here we have the first example indoor spinning session I wanted to look at with the Whoop Strap 4.0 again in red and the reference in blue-green. As you can see, for this session, there's more or less perfect agreement. Only right here that the Whoop Strap struggle a bit, but this would be perfectly fine for me. And that's actually true for many of the sessions. They look quite good also right here. This one looks quite good as well. Then here we have a bit of deviation in the beginning, but overall it doesn't look bad at all. Here it also looks quite good. Also right here as well. There are a few sessions though where it struggled a bit more, though these are rather the exception than the rule. For instance, this session right here, it didn't do quite as well. It struggled here in the beginning and also in the higher heart rate ranges. So at the top of each of the peaks, it didn't fully correctly detect the heart rate, though this is still doing quite well in my opinion. But generally, most indoor cycling sessions are almost perfect, like this one right here. Also this one right here, this one right here, and this one right here. Now cycling outside tends to be one of the harder exercises for watch the track, and that's also what we see right here for the Whoop Strap 4.0. Most points are still on or close to the blue line, but there's a bit more deviation now. There's especially a few points below the blue line right here. The correlation, this R value up here, is also a bit lower at 0.86. It's not terrible by any means, but it's definitely lower compared to the exercises we saw before. Now again, this correlation cannot be higher than 1, so 0.86 isn't terrible, but it could be better. Here it's really important we take a look at some of the individual sessions. So here, for example, we have a somewhat longer bike ride. And as you can see, overall, the Whoop Strap 4.0 agrees quite well with the reference device. There's a bit of deviation here in the beginning, but later on, it's almost spot on. For this shorter bike ride right here, it also looks okay, I would say, though there's definitely a bit of deviation, especially here in the end, it struggled quite a bit. Then there's also quite a few rides where it struggled a bit more, like right here, where it kept detecting a too low heart rate, so right here and right here. So this doesn't look amazing for this particular ride. But then again, some other rides were really good, like this one right here, where the Whoop Strap was basically spot on. Only right here was there a bit of struggle, but overall, I would call this almost perfect. So it's really a bit of a mixed bag, with some rides being quite good, like this one. Also, this one isn't bad. Also, this one doesn't look too bad with a bit of deviation right here. But then there's also some worse rides like this one right here. So overall for biking, it really seems to struggle most out of all the cardio exercises that I did. And to close off, I want to look at weightlifting, which is generally one of the hardest exercises for watch the track. And as you can see right here, overall it's quite okay in the lower heart rate range. But then here in the higher heart rate range, we can see quite a few points below the blue line, indicating that quite often the Whoop Strap 4.0 detected a too low heart rate when I was actually doing exercise. So weightlifting is hard because there's so much tension on your arm when you're doing an exercise. So it's harder for a watcher, in this case the Whoop Strap, to pick up on your heart rate signal when you're actually doing the exercise, and that's usually in the higher heart rate range. Now there are a few points up here where there is good agreement, but I'm afraid there might have been one weightlifting session where I also did a bit of cardio, and there it performed quite well. So overall, I'd probably not recommend the Whoop Strap for weightlifting, but let's take a look. And indeed, if we look at some recent weightlifting sessions, the Whoop Strap 4.0 in red wasn't able to pick up on all the peaks in my heart rate. So here in the beginning it did quite okay, but then here near the end it missed most of the peaks in my heart rate. And for this second example, it's more or less the same. Many peaks were sort of detected, but also many were missed. This is also what we see for this third example and also in this fourth example. So specifically for weightlifting, I wouldn't necessarily recommend the Whoop Strap, but for many of the cardio exercises we looked at, I would recommend it. But we can actually put all these results into perspective by comparing them against many of the other devices I've tested in the past, and that's displayed in this overview right here. So along the horizontal axis, we have the different sports I tested the Whoop Strap for, so spinning, biking, walking, running indoors, running outdoors, and weightlifting. And along the vertical axis, we have that correlation value we were looking at before. So I ranked all devices by the correlation value. So for each of the sports, we have all the devices that I tested, and each dot here is a single device. So for instance, for spinning, so cycling indoors, we can see that the lowest correlation of any device was 0.37 roughly, and the highest correlation was 1.00. And the Whoop strap is indicated by this red dot and red line right here with a correlation of 0.97 as we saw before, which means that it's better than 74% of devices that I tested, and it's really amongst the best devices for indoor cycling. Now for outdoor cycling, we saw it struggled a little bit, so it has a correlation of 0.86, but compared to the competition, that isn't that bad honestly. It's still better than 69% of devices I tested. Now we actually didn't take a look at walking before because I didn't test that many devices, but we can see that the correlation is quite good at 0.95, and it's better than 80% of the devices that I tested. Again, for running indoors, it did quite well, but basically all devices did quite well. The lowest correlation seems to be about 0.9 for running indoors, so almost all devices do well, and that includes the Whoop strap with a correlation of 0.98. Running outside appears to be more difficult for many devices, but here the Whoop strap does quite well with a correlation of 0.94, being better than about 63% of devices out there. Now for weightlifting, it has a correlation of 0.9, which is better than about 78% of devices out there. But again, based on what we saw for the individual weightlifting sessions, I wouldn't particularly recommend the Whoop strap 4.0 for weightlifting. It just misses too many of those peaks in heart rate. Overall though, if we exclude weightlifting, for all the cardio exercises, the Whoop strap seems to be doing quite well. Only for outside cycling does it seem to struggle a little bit, so the correlation is quite a bit lower than for the other exercises, but compared to the competition it's still quite okay, so I'm quite happy with these results. Now there are definitely some better devices out there for heart rate tracking. Now as regular viewers will know, basically any relatively recent Apple Watch will have really good heart rate tracking. That's also true for the newer Apple Watch Series 10, which is displayed right here. As you can see, the correlations are always really high for all the exercises that I tested it for. Again, for weightlifting, the Apple Watch does have some issues, which isn't really displayed in the correlation right here. But for all cardio exercises, I can really recommend the Apple Watch. The downside of the Apple Watch is that the app that it displays the data in isn't very good. I think data presentation and interpretation is very important, and Apple Watches just aren't very good at that. One other really good device on Android in this case is the Pixel Watch 3. I recently tested it and I was really impressed by the improved performance of the Pixel Watch 3 over the Pixel Watch 2 and Pixel Watch 1. You can see it also has really high correlation in this overview right here. Now in this overview for the Pixel Watch 3, you only see indoor cycling, outdoor cycling and weightlifting, but I actually also tested it for running and there it also did really well. But for technical reasons that didn't make it into this plot. Overall though, the Pixel Watch 3 is also a really good heart rate tracker, also a bit better than the Whoop strap 4.0. But again, the app and interpretation of the Pixel Watch 3 isn't quite as good as that of the Whoop strap. It is better than that of the Apple Watch, but again, the Whoop strap really has an edge over both the Pixel Watch and the Apple Watch when it comes to data presentation and data interpretation. And I actually also tested the Whoop strap 4.0 on my colleague Raphael to have a second set of data. And as you can see right here, his results look very similar to my results. So the sports he did were indoor cycling, outdoor cycling, running and weightlifting, and the correlations are almost identical to mine. So the correlation for indoor cycling is 0.96, 0.85, so quite a bit lower for cycling outside, but still quite decent. And for running outside, it did really well at 0.98. And again, I wouldn't recommend the Whoop strap for weightlifting. His correlation was even a bit lower. So overall looking quite good.
So that generally looks pretty good for the Whoop strap. It definitely has a few issues, but it's among some of the better devices out there. Though again, there are even better devices for heart rate tracking. But it's not just because of the heart rate tracking that I use the Whoop strap every day. It's because it's the best all-round device that I own. So it's not just good at heart rate tracking, but it also has decent sleep stage tracking performance, and it has a good app.
So that also means it's good at other things, and that actually includes sleep stage tracking. Now, as you might know, most smartwatches and fitness bands track 4 sleep stages. Those are deep sleep, REM sleep, light sleep and awake time. So how good is the Whoop strap? Well, I tested that using this little guy, the Z-Max EEG device, which can actually measure my brain waves and eye movements during the night. Now this is also not perfect, but good enough to give us a general impression. Luckily in the past, I also tested the Whoop strap with both polysomnography, which is the gold standard in sleep stage tracking, and also using another EEG device, and the results were very consistent. Let's take a look at those. But first, if you're finding these videos interesting, it really helps me get access to new devices sooner and helps me reach more people. If you like this video and subscribe to the channel, pressing those 2 buttons really makes a huge difference and I would really appreciate it. But back to the testing. And here you can see an overview of the sleep test results for a total of 54 nights. Now on top we have the sleep stages as recorded by the ZMax EEG headband, and on the left the sleep stages as measured by the Whoop Strap 4.0. Now each column right here sums to 100%, meaning that we can see what percentage of each of the sleep stages according to the ZMax was predicted as each sleep stage by the Whoop Strap 4.0. And if they would perfectly agree, all values on the diagonal should be 100%. First of all, we can see that about 73% of what was deep sleep according to the EEG device was also predicted as deep sleep by the Whoop Strap, so that's pretty good. And most confusion was in this case with light sleep. So about 21% of what the EEG device said was deep sleep was predicted as light sleep instead by the Whoop Strap. Light sleep agreement was okay at about 66%, so about 2/3 of what was light sleep according to the ZMax was also predicted as light sleep by the Whoop Strap. And most confusion in this case was with either deep sleep or REM sleep. Now REM sleep agreement was pretty okay, though also not amazing, at about 56%. So about 56% of what the EEG device said was REM sleep was also predicted as REM sleep by the Whoop Strap. But as you will see, based on the individual nights, this isn't as bad as it seems right here. So most of the REM sleep segments were correctly detected, just the duration and exact position was sometimes a bit different according to the Whoop Strap. But overall, you would be able to see your sleep cycles based on just the data of the Whoop Strap. Now, if the Whoop Strap did predict the REM sleep as something different, it was mostly as light sleep. Now, we generally don't focus on awake time detection because the ZMax tends to detect a lot of these short awakenings that aren't really awakenings, so you always have a low percentage right here. But just for completeness, about 43% of what the ZMax said was awake time was also detected as awake time by the Whoop Strap. But let's actually look at some individual nights so we can better understand what these percentages actually mean. Now, looking at the night itself will indeed help us understand this better, and here we can see the first night I wanted to share with you. On top we have the sleep stages according to the ZMax EEG headband, with along the horizontal axis the clock time and my sleep stages on the vertical axis. And on the bottom we have a similar plot, but now for the Whoop Strap 4.0. And in purple right here I highlighted the deep sleep as recorded by the EEG device. And as you can see, this agrees very well with the Whoop Strap, though the Whoop Strap did detect some extra deep sleep as well. But overall, this already looks very good. And for this second night, we see more or less the same thing. Again, most of the deep sleep segments agree, just the duration is a bit different, and the Whoop Strap also detects some extra deep sleep. That's also what we see for this fourth night right here. Again, some extra deep sleep is detected. And also this last example I wanted to share with you right here. So overall looking pretty good. What is deep sleep according to the EEG device is mostly also being detected as deep sleep by the Whoop Strap, but the Whoop Strap does detect some extra deep sleep. Next, instead of deep sleep, I want to look at REM sleep. So the REM sleep as detected by the EEG device is marked in red right here. And as you can see, that agrees very well with the Whoop Strap. So for this night, basically all the first 5 segments agree very well. Only here near the end of the night where I went in between REM sleep and awake time, the Whoop Strap just detected awake time and the EEG device detected some extra REM sleep. But overall for this night I'm very happy with that, but there are some nights that look a bit worse. So for instance for this second night right here, we can see that some of the REM sleep agrees very well with the Whoop Strap, but we can see that sometimes the exact duration doesn't really match, or in other cases where I switch between REM sleep and awake time, the Whoop Strap just detects awake time, and also this first short REM sleep segment right here was missed. But overall, this looks good enough to me. Now, this third example actually looks a bit worse. So some REM sleep agrees, still not bad, but a lot of extra REM sleep is detected, and also near the end, some REM sleep is missed. And for this final example, we again see pretty decent agreement. So most REM sleep segments agree very well. Only here near the end, where I alternated between awake time and REM sleep, again, the Whoop Strap only detected awake time. But generally this is still pretty good. We would be able to see most of my sleep cycles. And we can actually see that most clearly based on the first night we were looking at before. So each sleep cycle starts with light sleep and deep sleep and then ends with REM sleep. As you can see, I most likely had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 sleep cycles. The last one might have been incomplete. And we would mostly be able to see that based on the data of the Whoop Strap. Only this last one would have been difficult to see. So overall, I'm quite happy with this performance. As I said before, I don't want to focus on awake time because the ZMax EEG device tends to detect a lot of these short awakenings that aren't really full awakenings, so they're not that interesting. But as you can see, some of the longer awakenings do somewhat match between the EEG device and the Whoop Strap. What we did see before, that near the end of the nights when I alternate a bit between awake and REM sleep, the Whoop Strap just detects awake time. So that last period of the night going in and out of sleep was a bit tough, but overall this doesn't look so bad. And also for the sleep testing, we can put these results into perspective by comparing them against many of the other devices I've tested in the past, and that's displayed in this overview right here. Along the horizontal axis, we have the average agreement over the different sleep stages, and along the vertical axis, we have the agreement of the worst sleep stage. So the better the agreement, the more to the top right the device is. Now I have to admit this overview is slightly complicated because I use different reference devices. The devices marked in green were tested against the ZMax EEG headband as a reference, so the device we used in this video. The devices not marked in any color were tested against the Dream 2 EEG headband, which is my preferred reference actually because it's easy to use, but unfortunately Dream went bankrupt so I cannot use it anymore. And the devices marked in blue-purple were tested against polysomnography, which is the gold standard in sleep stage tracking. And right here we have the results from the Whoop Strap 4.0 from this video. Right here we have the results for the Whoop Strap 4.0 with polysomnography. And right here we can see an unmarked Whoop 4, which represents the results for when I tested it against the Dream 2 EEG headband a while back. Now overall we can see that all these results are super close to each other, so all these reference devices give more or less the same result. The average agreement over the individual sleep stages is between 65 and 70%, and the worst sleep stage is somewhere between 50 and 60%. So overall looking quite good, so it's sort of in the sub-top in terms of performance, so the second tier of devices, together with for instance Fitbit and Google devices that are performing about as well as the Whoop Strap. There are a few devices that are doing better in this case, especially Apple Watches, which always do well in my testing. Also the 8 Sleep Pod is one of my favorite devices, the one device that really improves my sleep quality, but it's quite expensive. And also the Nucoa app, now called Sleep 2, is doing quite well. And I have to say, based on both my results and those of scientific studies, it does appear as though the Oura Ring is outperforming the Whoop Strap a bit in terms of sleep stage tracking. So if you're purely looking for health and sleep tracking, then the Oura Ring is a really good choice and probably a bit better than the Whoop Strap. However, if you also want sports tracking, then the Whoop Strap will be my preferred device. But we can see that both the Oura Ring, the Whoop Strap, different Fitbit devices, Apple Watches, the 8 Sleep Pod are all doing a lot better than all these brands down here. So Galaxy watches, Garmin devices, and especially many Chinese brands aren't very good at sleep stage tracking. So generally, I would say that the Whoop Strap is good enough.
So one thing that's good about the Whoop Strap is that you can wear it anywhere.
Can you talk to me?
So one thing that's good about the Whoop Strap is that you can wear it anywhere. For instance, now I'm wearing it on my biceps and I can still wear 2 other watches. So I have the Enduro 3 and the Apple Watch. Now you cannot see it. And then another benefit in this case, that it's quite cold now. So the blood flow to my wrist is quite a bit worse. Probably the blood flow is a little bit better here on my biceps. So it potentially leads to a slightly better heart rate signal. But that I would actually have to test in the future. And I think for some other people, they also like the fact that even if you wear your Whoop Strap on your wrist, on the other wrist you can still wear a normal watch without it looking kind of weird. So yeah, that's one other reason I wear the Whoop Strap. But that's also personal for me. I need to test many different watches, so I need my wrists free. But of course, the fact that I wear it on my biceps also reveals a major limitation in my testing, and that is the fact that all these results are only true for when I wear it on my biceps. I haven't recently worn it on my wrist, so I cannot say for sure if the heart rate results especially translate to that situation as well. I think for the sleep stage testing it will make less of a difference. But anyway, I wanted to mention that limitation because also Raphael tends to wear his Whoop Strap mostly on his biceps.
So this sleep stage tracking is pretty good, but when it comes to general health tracking performance, the quality of the app can actually set a good device apart from an amazing one. And the Whoop Strap actually excels in this area with an app that I actually slightly prefer over the new Oura Ring app, but both are very good honestly. Upon opening the Whoop Strap app in the morning, you see a quick overview of your health stats and you can easily dive deeper into the data with just a few taps. As we saw, the Whoop Strap is pretty strong for workout tracking. It's amongst the upper middle class of devices for heart rate tracking during sports, providing relatively reliable data for your activities, which is not true for the Oura Ring, which really struggles measuring your heart rate during sports. And I would say the Oura Ring is one of the main competitors of the Whoop Strap in terms of health tracking. We saw that for sleep stage tracking, the Whoop Strap is in the second tier of devices, which is quite good, but the Oura Ring is definitely better there. Compared to other devices like the Oura Ring, the Whoop Strap offers a more versatile and complete package for both sports and health tracking, whereas the Oura Ring is mostly focused on just health. So if you're just focused on health tracking, I would prefer the Oura Ring, but if you want to track both sports and health, I think the Whoop Strap is better. So that's all looking pretty good so far.
But of course, there are also multiple downsides to the Whoop Strap, and one major one for me is that there's no built-in GPS, so you always need to take your phone with you if you want to track your ride or your run. Now for me this isn't a particularly big issue because in most cases I will have my phone on me anyway, but I can understand if it's a deal breaker for some of you.
Another downside of the Whoop Strap is that getting access to your raw data is pretty hard. I had all sorts of ideas for testing the heart rate and heart rate variability measurements during the night, but just cannot get access to that raw data. The official export of what is supposedly all your data on their server doesn't even include my heart rate during workouts, but of course we can see in the Whoop app that they do have that data.
data, so it's pretty weird that they don't provide it. Other companies like Aura or Apple are much better at providing you with your raw data if you ask for it. In the past, there have been times where I've emailed back and forth for months with Whoop before finally getting some of the data that I asked for. It's a bit better now, there's 2 export options, but they're still incomplete. For instance, for this video, I wasn't able to get the skin temperature measurements of the Whoop strap over the night. However, I did test this before, so it's a bit older data, but it's still interesting. Let's take a look at those results. To test this feature, I actually tracked my core body temperature using a pill that I swallowed. It's the MyTemp sensor from Purple Axis. It's relatively easy to swallow and it measures your core body temperature internally. This type of sensor is actually typically used by athletes for continuous temperature monitoring to assess safety and performance, but I repurposed it for sleep tracking. In the graph displayed right here, my core body temperature throughout one night is plotted in green, while my skin temperature recorded by the Whoop strap is plotted in black. The temperature in degrees Fahrenheit is shown on the right for my friends in the US and degrees C on the left for the rest of the world. Now, for those in the US curious about this letter C, as mentioned in the previous video, it stands for correct. But kidding aside, is the first letter of degrees Celsius, of course. Now, looking at the data in green right here, you'll notice that for the first part of the night, my core body temperature decreases before gradually rising again as morning approaches. Interestingly, my skin temperature as measured by the Whoop strap in black doesn't mirror this pattern. It increased when I got under the covers and then continues to rise slowly throughout the night with some fluctuations. So this really shows a difference between the 2 measurements. And we see a similar trend for this second night. So my core body temperature in green initially drops and then rises again, whereas my skin temperature according to the Whoop strap shows a more consistent upward trend. And this general pattern repeated across all the nights that I tested it. So the core body temperature graph sort of resembles a hammock shape, so dropping and then rising again, whereas my skin temperature according to the Whoop strap shows a more or less steady increase with some fluctuations. And one final thing I need to add, while editing I was going through the files again and I noticed that the skin temperature was recorded also recently, so that data is available. Let me show you right here. So here you can actually see one of the CSV files that was exported and you can see my skin temperature and par skin temperature right here. So this was only available for some of the newer files, but if you're interested you can get that data. Now, this kind of difference between the Whoop strap's measured temperature and my core body temperature doesn't necessarily mean that the Whoop strap is inaccurate. Rather, I think it highlights the difference between core and skin temperature. Skin temperature is much more susceptible to environmental factors like whether or not I'm covered by a blanket. This also means that the primary purpose of the Whoop strap's temperature sensor is likely to detect changes of your average temperature over the night over time. For example, you might have an elevated temperature due to a viral infection. And this has generally worked well for me, where a high temperature has correlated with me not feeling so well, so it might have correlated with viral infection. However, I've noticed 1 or 2 cases where I think it falsely detected a high temperature, where the Oura Ring, for instance, didn't detect it and I didn't feel bad at all. I did find it super interesting when going through the full data export that there's a column called Prob COVID, which I assume means it calculated the probability I had COVID. So could the Whoop strap actually detect when I had COVID? Well, for the 1166 days I had data for, I had COVID 1 time. And we can see that exported data in this Excel sheet right here. So we have the different periods in this column and we have the probability of having COVID according to the Whoop strap in this column right here. And the green marker right here indicates the period that I actually had COVID. And as you can see, it estimated my probability at about 20% of having COVID. And I actually sorted all the rows here by the probability of having COVID according to the Whoop strap. And as you can see, the day that I first tested positive for COVID was ranked 8 out of 1166 days. So that's pretty good. But it also means there were 7 days that ranked higher than this one when I didn't have COVID. I should also be clear, I don't actually know what this probability of having COVID actually means and how they calculate this. This is just what showed up in the export of the data. I don't think I was meant to see this, honestly, but I find it pretty cool. And just to prove to you I actually had COVID on that day, this is part of my diary right here. And as you can see, on December 8th, 2022, matching with the date right here, was the first time I turned COVID positive. So this was the first time I ever caught COVID, and the Whoop strap was somewhat able to detect it. So this does hint at least at some ability for the Whoop strap to detect something like a viral infection, though it does seem far from perfect. Overall, I am happy with my Whoop strap and I've used it for many years now. There's still room for improvement though, and hopefully that'll come over time. If you want to track everything comprehensively, so from exercise to sleep to health, and get an app that shows you your data pretty well, then the Whoop strap is one of the main devices I would recommend. However, if you're just interested in one particular thing, like just heart rate or just sleep stage tracking, there is likely a better device out there for you. And that brings me to the last downside of the Whoop strap, which is the subscription model. There's no upfront cost for the device, but
but you will likely pay somewhere around $200 to $250 a year just to use the Whoop strap. The upside is that you get a new device for free when they release a new one. But if you want to save some money, I would recommend using my affiliate link below, which will give you the best discount possible and even support the channel at the same time. Which is even a bit better during sales periods like Black Friday for instance. No matter what, you'll get the best deal. Also, consider becoming a YouTube member if you want to support the channel. Now, given that you watched this whole video on the Whoop strap, I think you'll like this video on the best devices for sleep stage tracking or this video on the Oura Ring. Thank you so much for watching and catch you in the next video.